T cells or antibody acts as a pathogenic role. We will talk into the mechanism. You will be able to understand in the mechanism side. So if you look at this picture, it explains number one is the genetic susceptibility. Genes really plays in the failure of your immune tolerance. Okay, if you have some predisposition, inheritance of your susceptibility genes, for example, HLA or immune regulatory genes, okay? So this causes a failure in your immune tolerance, okay? Your immune system is broken down, okay? It's the self-tolerance. So there is a tissue damage or activation of APCs, activation of reactive lymphocytes, and then you have the tissue damage and the autoimmune diseases. So it becomes another factor, like infections also is one of the factor for autoimmune diseases, okay? Infection, in what way it causes the autoimmune disease, you will be able to understand in the next slides. Here I gave an example about molecular mimicry in the rheumatoid fever that cause the infection will mimic the self-antigens, okay? It will mimic because of the some sequence in its, it will just tease our cells, okay, to produce the antibodies, okay? So the other one is the APC, by breakdown of T cell energy infection, upregulated by the APC, okay? And then there is a tissue injury over time. So as we talk about the genetic, there are like different genetic roles, like mutation of your genes, one, your HLA that is in the MHC molecule, right? So chromosome here, and then they use different studies for the gene sequence understanding, which kind of genes cause directly or indirectly in the autoimmunity, okay, breakdown of your tolerance, or it can be epigenetic, okay. When we talk about the infection, like I told you earlier about molecular mimicry, now in the first understanding, how does our immune cells tolerate, okay? Like this could be a antigen, for example, here. T cells, in some way, it will just have a tolerance, can be deletion, energy, or regulatory T cells, okay? So tolerate, but if it activates the APC, for example, here microbes, you have the self-antigen, it will mimic here, activates the antigen presenting cells and co-express the stimulatory dendritic T cells here, you know, receptor something somehow, and then you have the self-reactive T cells causing the autoimmunity, okay? Now, there is another way of infection causing an autoimmunity, that is molecular mimicry. So this is microbes. So microbes contains microbial protein. For example, here, microbial protein contains some kind of sequence in the peptide, the protein sequence, very similar to our cell protein. So it will cause the microbial antigens to bind to the T cells, causing the activation of the T cells, leading to autoimmunity, okay? So this is how infection promote autoimmunity, okay? Activation of APC or in molecular mimicry, okay? Now, environmental factor is also important. There are many environmental factor, microorganism, maybe xenobiotics, can be some molecules or drugs or even the light rays, okay, or the heavy metals, even it will cause you. What is the mechanism? Molecular mimicry, okay? It will mimic our immune system or our cells, okay, because it can somehow contains similar it will mimic the similar system to our self-antigens, okay? Or the apoptosis also sometimes causes autoimmunity. And microbiota are in our gut or respiratory system, okay, or skin. And the nutrition, the food that you take. So this is the mechanism here. We will look into each later. Just understand here the environmental factor that causes autoimmunity: microorganisms, xenobiotics, apoptosis, microbiota, and the nutrition. Now, earlier I told you about the pathologic mechanism. So here are a few examples, the beautiful examples that I have mentioned. The tissue destruction, like in the case of type 1 diabetes, the T cells destroys the B cells in pancreas so that there is no insulin, okay? So that leads to the type 1 diabetes. So in antibodies, blocks the normal functions. So as self-antigens, self-autoantibodies will bind to the acetylcholine receptors, causing no muscle relaxations, okay, causing the disease, myasthenia gravis. And antibodies sometimes stimulate. In this case, it will block, okay? In another case, it will stimulate the inappropriate functions. So as the autoantibodies binds to the TH thyroid stimulating hormone TSH receptor, it will mimic the hormone and then release of the thyroid hormone production, causing the Graves' disease. Okay. In the antigen antibody complex in the rheumatoid arthritis is a disease of the joints, is more systemic than those over three. These three are very organ specific, but this is systemic. It forms a complex, immune complex, type 3, right? Type 3 immune complex with the IgG causing you the disposition in the joints and the actually inflammation in the joints, okay? So earlier I mentioned you that the hypersensitivity also involves in autoimmune disease type 1, 2, type 2, sorry, 3, 4, okay? There is no evidence of type 1 allergic or IgE mediated injuries, okay? So we look into each examples here. When we look into each example, I just gave a few examples. First is the autoimmune hemolytic anemia, okay? This is the blood group kind of like the autoantigen is the Rh blood group, okay? The consequence is the red blood cells are destroyed, okay? So here, if for example here, if the father is Rh positive and mother is negative during pregnancy, like Rh negative mother with the Rh positive baby. So at delivery, Rh positives are like invades enters the blood system, but bloodstream of the mother, like inducing Rh positive, okay, antibodies. So these antibodies remains in this bloodstream, and when she have the second pregnancy, it will cause the death of the baby, okay? So this is autoimmune hemolytic anemia, okay? Now, just remember the autoantigens and the autoimmune disease, okay? The name concerned to that. So now in another case, the autoimmune thrombocytopenia, this is the autoimmune disease that our antigens uh, react to our own platelet, okay, blood platelet. So the antibodies, and then we have the platelet formation like this, clustering, and there is no production or less productions of platelet, causing a purple patches in our skin, okay, this kind of patches in our skin. And when and autoantibody against the cell surface or matrix antigen. This is also type 2 hypersensitivity. The good examples I have mentioned is Goodpasture syndrome. It basically focuses on lungs and kidney kind of autoimmune diseases, okay? Like for example, here in the glomerulonephritis causing in the kidney, here is the antigen in the basement membrane of glomeruli causing the formation of the complex which activates the complement C causing the glomerulonephritis, okay, or vasculitis. And there is another example here in the skin-related pemphigus vulgaris. It attacks to your skin, okay, causing you like this kind of blisters and peeling of your skin. So the antigens that causes are not really clearly known, but it acts with the epidermal, your skin related, it tries to bind with the skin related proteins, causing the destructions, okay, of the skin. Okay, now immune complex, that is type 3. It's very complicated one here. So I put the topic mixed essential cryobulimia. So when you talk about cryobulimia, it is basically cold temperature, okay? Due to the cold, your blood try to clot, or I mean like the clump become, blood becomes thickened and clump, okay? Clump together, and it will cause the immune reactions, okay? So it, like as you see here, the cryobulimia, the protein name cryobulimia, okay? Buline, sorry, protein name is cryoglobulin, okay, sorry, cryoglobulinนะครับ. So this is here. Sometimes it also have another antigens, that is hepatitis C antigens, causing the production of antibody. Then there is the complex formation here, okay, so that causes you different immune pathological responses, okay. Now, in another case of immune complex is the rheumatoid arthritis, okay, that basically mostly affects the joints of our body, okay, mainly the joints, and it at once, every part of the joints in at once, okay. So the rheumatoid arthritis. So in the rheumatoid arthritis, so your cells, you have the antigens release the autoantibodies that causes in the synovial membrane, causes the inflammation, causing to the effect to the joints, okay, causing the arthritis. C means consequences. Now, I have already mentioned here consequences. And when now another example here of T cells or type 4 hypersensitivity. The first one is type 1 diabetes. Like I mentioned to you, the T cells act to the pancreatic B cells destruction. So there is no insulin or less insulin productions, okay, causing type 1 diabetes, okay. And in the multiple sclerosis, so this is also a bit hardly understood currently, but basically one example is the antigen is myelin basin protein or myelin sheath, okay. A damage of that myelin sheath protein cause you the multiple sclerosis, okay, basically in the brain and spinal cord, okay, damage to the nerves fibers, okay. So it has different consequences. It affects on different organs as well, okay. This is the normal neuron, how it looks like, but the breakdown of the neuron or myelin here, it will cause you the multiple sclerosis, okay. And then we move to the T cell, another one as well, example here, T cell mediated Crohn's disease or in the colon, okay. So in the colon here, we have some kind of antigens in the gut, okay, intestinal microbiota that causes you the inflammation or patchy inflammation in your gut. So this is one example of T cells mediated disease in type 4, okay. And another one is the skin, basically affects these areas in our skin, okay, face and this area joints here. So psoriasis, the antigens are unknown, but basically they are said that it acts with the mistakenly our T cells mistakenly attacks the skin antigens, skin proteins, causing the inflammation of the skin, okay. So T cells, okay, please remember T cell mediated. So we talk a lot about the different reactions and the mediated like T cells or complex mediated diseases or hypersensitivities. So now we just try to separate that into a mechanism, okay? So there are many mechanisms, but broadly, the main class of mechanisms that I would like to list here is this 5 classes here: sesquitur, antigens, molecular mimicry that we talked earlier about the microbes, microbial infections, and then the inappropriate expressions of the MHC, okay, that causes the APC cells, okay, on the APC cells, sorry, and polyclonal B cells activation, epitope spreading. So we'll look into each. So when we talk about cis-Twitter antigens, so some self-antigens are cis-Twitter or hidden in a specialized tissue. We have that antigens in our tissue, but it's hidden, it's not seen. So it will not induce self-tolerance, okay? So exposures of T cells to these antigens will cause the reaction. For example, here there are a number of examples. This is the antigens examples. Nahab. So the one good example is myelin basic protein or myelin sheath. In the myelin sheath, there is a protein that is associated with multiple sclerosis. Okay, I think in your slides it might be MS. So it's multiple sclerosis. This is one of the good example for sesquitter antigen. Okay. There are other sesquitter antigens in different uh, forms, maybe in the sperm associated or in the lens or also in the heart muscles, okay? So here is an example in the eye or eyes. For example, if some antigens like because of trauma, you have it releases the antigens like this in the system, in the lymphoid nodes. As it passes through the nodes and it will affect your another eye as well, the both eye. So this is an example of sesquitter antigens, okay? Molecular mimicry that we talked earlier, it will just mimic the normal functions, okay? Like virus and bacteria possesses antigenic determinant that are very similar or identical to the normal cells, okay? That's what I told you. The virus and bacteria has some kind of antigenic properties that has a similar in some way within a host cell, okay, or component. So this causes the molecular mimicry, okay? Occurs in different organisms. Nahab. So molecular mimicry may be initial steps to many different autoimmune diseases. So infection is also not good for us to cause different microbial infections. It will mimic the process of self-host cells and causing an autoimmune diseases, okay? So here is what I talked to you about, some identical or very similar in what way to our host. What are those similar properties? So when we look into the sequence of the protein sequence, okay, so this is the autoimmune diseases that we listed here. I have listed here, and we have the microbe, for example, E. coli infection to you, and then we have our HLA genetics genes. When you look into the sequence of these two, the E. coli sequence, our human self sequence, so it's so similar in the amino acids. So this is what I'm talking to you about. The self is, it will mimic. So there is infection from E. coli, it will mimic that, oh, it looks like my own self. So it will mimic and it will cause the autoimmune disease. So there are examples here, multiple sclerosis, for example, Epstein-Barr virus, okay, that, and another one is type 1 diabetes, hepatitis C virus, myasthenia gravis, polio virus, okay, rheumatoid fever, we have streptococcus pyogenes, okay, so that mimics the self, okay. So inappropriate expression of class 2. So class 2 expression of APCs like that are expressed in the APC, okay. So such as like macrophages, dendritic cells, and B cells. So when it is expressed, it recognizes the autoantigens by your reactive T cells, okay? Then there is a production of interferon gamma, and then the expression of the MHC. Also, sometimes the viral infection could also cause the induce of the interferon gamma. So here is an example here. This is the normal pancreas, and this is the pancreas with insulitis like type 1, right? Diabetes, you see expression of MHC is allowed and then causes your in the pancreas, okay? Damages your pancreas. Here, on the other hand, you see here that to explain this one, now in the normals, our in kidney or the pancreas or the, not kidney, pancreas, the islets of Langerhans, we have the glucagon synthesis secreting insulin, somatostatin, right? So when the T cells binds to the B cells here, it will block, it destroys the B cells. So there is no insulin productions, okay? So this is how it looks like. Polyclonal B cell activation. I'm not sure how you will understand this one. So this one is the like proliferation. The virus and bacteria can induce the proliferation of our cells, immune system, in non-specific, it doesn't have a specific ways, but in non-specific ways, it will try to proliferate and differentiate our B cells in a polyclonal way, okay, in many ways, okay. So those viruses and examples are here, those viruses that cause the polyclonal B cells activation. When I talk to you about proliferation and differentiation, you see here, virus affecting your B cells, somehow it just goes proliferate and differentiates, non-specifically production of different polyclonal antibodies, which will cause you autoimmunity, okay? Epitope spreading. When we talk about epitope spreading, use epitope is the site where antigens binds with the antibody, right? So the changes from primary epitope to the other epitope. So if you look here at there is an infection of viral infection, and the more tissue damage and release of self antigens here. This is the antigens here, blue, and here, orange or yellow, yes. Okay, and then we have the self-antigen presented to APC. Here is your APC presented to APC T cells. T cell response spreads to other, and here the epitope binds here other T cells, autoreactive T cells. Okay, so causing you autoimmunity. So the spreading of the epitope. And those are the factor. There are also hormones that are also known as the factor to cause autoimmune diseases, mostly predominant to the female gender, like I mentioned to you earlier. In the animal model study, estrogen can induce B cells to enhance anti-DNA antibodies, okay? So like SLE either appears or exacerbates during pregnancy, okay? So if you see here, like in the human, okay, in the female gender, when they are born to the early, the B cells are more than the T cells. So estrogen stimulate this different kind of autoimmune diseases. But as they became old or the late, as they age, the B cell dominant autoimmunity is reduced, but T cells proceeds. Now T cells induce autoimmune diseases begins. So from the childhood, nothing, but as in the mid, in the reproductive year, maybe like 12 or 11, 12, 13, at this age starts, okay? And if you see at this graph here, you see the blue is for the male and the purple or the pink is for the female, okay? So the male, like Sjögren's syndrome or SLE, is very less, whereas for the female it's so high, okay? So one of the example that dominates for the male is spondylitis, okay? Alkalizing in spondylitis is very common in the man. How does this disease look like? I'm not sure. It is the pain of the joints. If you can look into this example here, I will just show you. Yeah, here, as you can see it inflammation joints. This is the normal spinal cord here, and inflammation of the joints in the spine cause you the in the bones, like the bamboo spine is the typical characteristic, okay? The inflammation of the joints causing you that kind of is mostly predominant in the male, okay, than the female. So, okay, now during pregnancy, there are situations sometimes the autoimmune diseases, the anti-auto antibodies transfers through the placenta, okay? In most of the case known so far, it is IgG autoantibodies now, not other than IgG, okay, that causes like autoimmune diseases from the placenta or from mother to the child. So the first one is myasthenia gravis, that is also in joints, okay, the muscle weakness, and the Graves disease, thyroid hormone, like hyperthyroidism, okay, and thrombocytopenia porphyria that we talked to you earlier about the platelet, okay, and Pegmasis vulgaris, Pemphigus vulgaris about the skin also, the blistering. So these are the examples, good examples of IgG autoantibodies from the transfer from mother to the child, okay. And the classification of the autoimmune diseases based on the receptor that acts to the receptor, okay. In the Graves disease, it acts to the TSH receptor. In myasthenia gravis, to the acetylcholine receptor, okay. It will cause the muscle weakness, the same one. And another one is in the insulin receptor for the insulin resistant diabetes, or hypoglycemia insulin receptor as well. It can have either an agonist or antagonist properties. When we talk about agonist, it will stimulate the receptor, okay, or antagonist means it will inhibit, okay, the receptor. There are other factors for autoimmunity that you don't have to remember it. So this is just, I listed that. Beside those, there are other factors as well, or other ways of mechanism. So remember, most of the disease and the autoantibodies involved, okay? And the classification, for example, here, autoimmune disease based on the IgG autoantibodies transfer from mother to the child or through the placenta, for example. And we have the mechanism of each, okay, and examples. Molecular mimicry, okay, diseases, molecular mimicry most commonly seen. For example, here I have, and mechanism, okay, so we have the T cells mediated, immune complex mediated, and antibody against cell surface, that is type 2 hypersensitivity reactions, and each examples, okay. Do you have any question, Mekha?
No ค่ะ
Okay, that's very good. Okay, so the other part of the topic, this is the most important part of the lectures, the one we just finished. So the other part, I just want to explain to you a bit of some of the disease here. So we know that in the autoimmune, the recognition of autoantigen is important by the lymphocytes, okay, B or T cells. So tissue destruction, not just autoimmune cells, must be present, okay. Autoimmune disease, AD, involve self-reactive T cells, okay. Autoimmune induction almost always depend on triggering the autoreactive CD4 T cells, okay. So here I'd like to explain the two. One is the stimulating antibodies, one is blocking antibodies, example like Graves disease and myasthenia gravis, okay. One acts as an agonist, one as the antagonist, okay. So in the Graves disease, that is the production of thyroid hormone is regulated generally by the thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH, okay. But in the person who have the Graves disease, the autoantibodies are bound to the receptor of TSH. As a result, it will stimulate the production of two thyroid hormones, okay, causing you this kind of here, you see, okay, the goiter and different symptoms in different part of your body. So this is how it looks like. Normally, it is this the system, okay? Our TSH here, stimulating hormone, and its receptor here. So our it has a system to regulate the hormone synthesis, okay? This is normal function, but in the Graves' disease, when the autoantibody binds to the receptor of TSC rather than the TSH, it will just stimulate the hormone production, causing you like goiter here and different characteristic in different organs, okay? Like in the eye, become big, bulge like this, prominence of the eye. So this one. Now in the myasthenia gravis, uh, it, in this case, in the first case, it will stimulate the hormone. In this case, it will just stop the hormone, okay? It will just don't let the acetylcholine receptor to bind there, okay? So there is no normal neuromuscular junction, like normal functions of neuromuscular junction, okay? So here is the normal event. You have the acetylcholine receptor, you have the acetylcholine here, it binds to this, and there is a muscle relaxation, okay? Binds to this receptor, and then there's a flux muscle contraction, okay, happening on muscle. And then in the myasthenia gravis, so the antibodies, autoantibodies binds to the receptor. As a result, there is no muscle contractions or happening, so the binds to the acetylcholine, just there's no sodium influx, no muscle contraction, okay? So this is one. And then the systemic autoimmune disease, I have listed two here, okay? One for the first one is systemic lupus erythematosus. So the very characteristic features of this disease is the butterfly rash, Bethany. Look at here the picture. It looks like this butterfly rash. It's potentially fatal, okay, autoimmune disease, and very predominant to the female, okay, and affects the multi-organ, as I told you earlier. The genetic predisposition, a very important factor here, is a different HLA, okay? And let's go to the here. This is how the pathogenesis looks like, okay? Possible. If you see at this figure better, this figure explains the whole process here, okay? There is a loss of your tolerance to nuclear antigens, okay? So in SLE, it like not just the auto antigens, okay, that causes, there are other factors like genetics, okay, really plays a role here. So in this case, it's mostly anti-nuclear autoantibodies, okay? And there is a response, hyper response in your immunity, causing different pathogenic autoimmunity. And then there is a failure of different organ system, okay? So what kind of autoantigen, like autoantibodies, like the anti-nuclear autoantibodies? So when in the apoptotic or the apoptosis cell, you have the bleed. If you remember the first year lecture from, I don't know, who taught you cell death and apoptosis. So normally apoptotic cells has the bleed. This is kind of one of the anti-nuclear autoantibodies, okay? That anti-DNA productions, okay? This causes you the hyper response in the immune system, okay? Also, there is a genetic playing a big role in this kind of disease, okay? Here explains the earlier picture, this one, the whole. So you have the genes, okay, genetics that I mentioned, and you have the environmental, one of the factor. So there is a suppression causing the abnormal immune response, okay? So that autoantigens or the anti-nuclear autoantibodies. So you have the autoantibodies and the complex, immune complex affecting the inflammations, kidney, okay? Basically, and then there is a chronic inflammations, the damage of different organs, and you have the symptoms appear in your face, okay? So how are they detecting this kind of autoantibodies? In case of SLE, the autoantibodies, they detect mostly the anti-nuclear autoantibodies, or ANA, okay? So there are different regulation by the different health guidelines provided. But basically, the positive is when the ratio is 1 to 160, okay, the titer volume. So this is that all patients, classify it as SLE, okay. There are other ways of investigation of diagnosis of SLE, okay, different approach they have. So the most one is the best screening test is the ANA, anti-nuclear antibody, okay. So yeah, I mentioned to you the guidelines earlier, right? So this is one of the criteria or the classification of SLE. So clinical domains, immunological domains here they have. Um, so this is how they carry out the process of classification of SLE, okay? And the other one is the disease of the joints, okay, that happens in the joints, like for example, okay, is the common autoimmune disease, rheumatoid arthritis, in normal immune response directed against an individual own tissue, your own tissue, okay, mostly the joints, tendons, and the bones. Destruction of this tissue is like progressive disability, systemic complications in your own systemic, and causing you all the death, okay? Rheumatoid arthritis is not known atopic. It's a complex immune interplay between genes, environmental trigger. And they also have reported the genetic factor, particularly is one locus here, okay? So here is how it looks like this is the normal joint you see here, okay? But in the rheumatoid arthritis, in the synovial membrane synovium here, there is inflammation because of the autoantibodies here causing the destruction of your bones, cartilage, and then you have the inflammation, inflammation, okay, here, synovitis, okay. In rheumatoid arthritis, or there is another one, rheumatoid factor, okay, or the complex that are formed between the IgG and the IgM, okay, Fc region of the IgM that first was identified in rheumatoid arthritis, of the factor of autoantibodies that causes the rheumatoid arthritis, okay. So this is the IgM bound to the Fc portion of your IgG. This is called the rheumatoid factor, okay. So the treatment measures of the autoimmune diseases. In this section, I would like to just give you the different classification or the group of the management of autoimmune diseases, okay. So before going to that, how are the autoimmune disease like in terms of diagnostic step, right? So there are histological physical examination, laboratory. We have different lab testing, or like very specific is autoantibodies, and another additional analysis is the different kind of testing with the immune systems like immunoglobulins or different other, okay. And then further they do the additional testing for more complex diseases, okay. So when we move to the therapies or the treatment measure, there are two types of therapies, current therapies, and the based on the experimental therapeutic approach, okay. So they use different concept. So the first one is aimed at reducing symptoms by producing non-specific suppression of the immune system. It tried to reduce the symptoms, and in this case try to induce the specific immunity, okay. It will just try to induce the specific immunity if you know the particular target that you are looking at to treatment of the autoimmune disease. So here the examples of the therapies are immunosuppressive drugs, okay. There are many type of immunosuppressive drugs that are prescribed, or thymectomy is the removal of thymus, for example, in the myasthenia gravis patients, okay. And then the another is plasmapheresis, the removal of antigen antibody complex for a short term, okay. The removal of the complex, that is the current therapies like immunosuppressive drugs, thymectomy, plasmapheresis, okay. And on the other hand, about the another approach that induces the specific immunity. The one example that we have here is T cell vaccination. So autoimmune T cell clones from the regulatory T cells specific to T cell receptor on the autoimmune T cells that will have to reduce the suppressions of the autoimmune cells. One is T cell vaccination here. The other one is peptide blockade of MHC molecule. The peptide binds to the regular peptide on MHC that will induce the clonal energy. So clonal energy, if you remember it, it is not in the state of death or cell death, it's unresponse immune system, okay? Immune cells, unresponsive, no functional response. So another one is monoclonal antibody, okay? Different monoclonal antibody to target a different uh, sites or specific immunity. So monoclonal antibody, especially interleukin-2 receptors, can block the T helper cells. Blockage of preferred T cells receptors, also another approach for monoclonal antibodies. And then we have the oral antigens that can induce the tolerance, okay? But currently they are still in the trials, it seems. And this example here, the figure shows the picture of how the autoimmune disease are targeted for treatment, okay, or different cells are looked into different stage in the pathogenesis, they are targeted. Now, if you try to understand now, this is our precursor cells or lymphoid tissues here, the lymphoid, yes. Lymphoid precursor, you have the cells here as it differentiate, okay, into different immune B cells, T cells, or effector system. So why don't we just treat here directly? So there are different treatment. So if you look at the darker yellow here, or the orange, we could say, they are the current conventional treatment that is, and the lighter ones are that they are like kind of feasible or possible hypothesis of feasible approach of treatment, okay? So in here, before it differentiates, if we do T or B cell depletion is one of the treatment over here, so that there will be no autoimmunity or autoimmune disease, okay? And here, if you see another one, anti-CD or anti-mitotic drugs, okay? So this, if you try to here, it will also breaks the autoimmunity or autoimmune disease, okay, happening. So there are other areas of treatment like cyclosporine, this is immunosuppressive drug, or anti-inflammatory drugs, okay? And there are another anti-TNF alpha, okay? So different medication at different stage of immune system, okay? I have just listed here the same of the treatment measures here that we just classified into two, okay? And there are other ways for pharmacologic methods for treatment as well, health education, exercise, rehabilitation like physical or mental, and surgical management, okay? So the take-home message here is that normal health state is maintained by immunological tolerance against self-antigen, either at the central or peripheral level, okay? Autoimmune disease results from breakdown of immunological tolerance to self-antigen. If your body does not tolerate your self-antigen, then it will cause you the autoimmune disease. Certain autoimmune disease exhibit strong association to the female, okay? This is the take-home message. So this is the end of the talk. I just tried to make it shorter so that we have enough time for your quiz of about 25 questions. So do you have any questions, Kam, before we move into the quiz discussion? The quiz questions, about 25, can help you review our lecture of today. It is like a summary question, and it has focus on all the important aspect of the today's talk. So I try to make the question like a review for you. Does anybody have questions, or you are ready for the quiz? มีไหมครับ
ไม่มีค่ะ
ไม่มีเหรอ ready for the quiz เหรอครับ
maybe not
Maybe not. Just try. Quiz is the brief summary, and it is like a review. Okay, if you know the questions, 25 questions for the quiz, if you read, it's perfect for your future as well as for your exam, everything. It's just formative assessment, huh? If you are ready, I will just start the quiz. Okay, the people who are ready, they can answer it. People who aren't ready, they can try to read and then, okay, me? Or should I wait for 5 or 10 minutes? Let's do this then. So a different classification of autoimmune disease I have listed based on the mechanism, based on the hypersensitivity, based on the what's that? The antibody transfer from placenta of the mother to child, also based on the receptor, okay, and basically all the diseases that has a different ways of pathogenic factor, okay, or that causes you the autoimmune diseases based on different mechanism. I have classified it so that you can understand it, but if it complicates, do let me know which part you did not get it, okay, and how does the infection promotes autoimmunity, okay, and environmental factors in the autoimmunity, okay, the microorganisms, xenobiotics, or chemicals, or different physical factors, okay, physical or chemical factors, apoptosis, okay, our immune systems, mechanism of apoptosis, our gut, okay, microbiota at the gut, or the skin, or the respiratory system, nutrition, for example, another. And in terms of hormone also, that causes a different disease for very good, although it is dominant to the female, but when we look into the male, the dominant for the male is spondylitis, that is the spine diseases, okay, one example. And IgG and autoantibodies from the placenta transfer, okay, receptor we have, yeah. And types, organ specific and systemic autoimmune diseases, okay. And the another important part is the tolerance, central tolerance, peripheral tolerance. We have in the central tolerance, apoptosis, negative selection or deletion, clonal deletion, we can also say that. And the regulatory T lymphocytes, basically also receptor editing, change in the receptor. That is how we tolerate the self-antigens. But when we look into the peripheral tolerance at the peripheral tissues, we have the energy, functional unresponsiveness, okay? There is no response, or intrinsic mechanism is down-regulated. That is energy. There's another one is clonal deletion or apoptosis, or deletion or negative selection. And then we have the suppression, okay, regulated by T lymphocytes. Okay, Mike. Shall we start then? for the quiz? Okay. Here is. There are 25 questions. I'm waiting for the answers. So you have 30 minutes. 9, 18, 5, 10, 15, 20, 39, 50, maybe 9:45, right? So that we have 10 minutes for the talking of the questions, answers for the questions. Hello, Cap. Is it difficult? If you have some confusion or some question is you cannot understand, you can send me a private chat, so I can explain to you by chat, or I can explain by voice, by talking, both. It's okay. Good luck.
Teacher, I have problem. I can put the choice.
Yeah, which one? Which one? Which question?
Anki losing spondylitis occurs mostly in men compared to women.
Oh, okay, okay. Let me.
Teacher, me too.
Watching all.
Yes.
Okay.
In multiple sclerosis immune system.
Hold on a second. You cannot choose.
Yes.
Yes, I cannot choose and I cannot next page too.
Um, I think it is. Why? How about the other true and false? You can choose.
Yes, normal I can choose.
Okay. Let me. Oh, I see. Can you try now? Is it the same?
The same.
Or really? Can you maybe?
I will refresh again.
Yeah, exactly. You have to refresh. So what about the next girl? What was your problem at the multiple choice?
Teacher, I need to do it again. Can I have a more time?
Yeah, you have the time. Don't worry, don't worry. By 9:45, 9:50, okay? Everybody have time until 9:50, because like the next class they are on the queue, so we need to finish before. So we have time to discuss the answer. You may have to refresh your question, Nahab. I think there is some problem with your my or your internet, so maybe you have to refresh it and start.
Teacher, I can put
Which question?
in multiple
In
sclerosis
multiple.
immune system attract the myelin sheath.
Oh, okay. In multiple choice?
Yes.
Oh, no, in multiple choice, I have only two.
True first.
True or false? Okay. You should be able to choose Kap. ไม่ได้เหรอ? Maybe it's your drop down menu is not working, because in my setting everything is perfect.
มันไม่ได้
จริงเหรอ? Maybe you try to if I give you multiple choice, if I ไม่ได้เหรอ?
Yeah.
Refresh ไม่ได้เหรอ?
If I refresh, I must sense.
You must start again, right?
Okay. Teacher, can I give QR code again, please?
Oh, okay. Yeah, here are you. Okay, we have received about 3 responses. So we have a lot of students to respond. So we have the last 10 minutes and a half. And we should be done in the last within the next 8 minutes. Okay, so then we have about 5 minutes to just share you the answer. Now last 5 minutes, my friends, my students. Okay, So I think the class for the next are waiting for us. So 5 minutes. We have received 51 responses so far. How is the question, Kam? Is it difficult?
Teacher,
How do you feel? Yes. อะไรนะครับ
my teeth it's the start again.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So, how do you want me to do it? Do you want me to give you time?
Yes.
So, how about the answers? You don't want the answers? Do you want me to put the answers in the e-learning?
Answer,
ไหมครับ
but I
โอเค
Sorry?
ค่ะ teacher
Yeah, I will put the answers in the e-learning นะครับ
ค่ะ
Okay?
โอเค
Because we don't have time to discuss now, see? So I will wait for your friends to answer. So I will give you time more, 15 minutes for everybody. I will close the Google form at 10:10, okay? 10:10, sorry, yeah. Okay? ได้ไหมครับ Is it enough? For maybe more than 30 persons. Okay, I will close at 10:10, okay? So I cannot wait more than that. If you don't do it within 10:10, I will just, yeah. You can just send me an email or message in the Facebook or whatever if you have missed the whole question, okay? Anyway, Kap, the question patterns, you have seen it, so yeah. Kap, then I think I will end the class now, okay? Kap, ขอบคุณครับ
ขอบคุณค่ะ
Thank you, teacher.
Thank you
Thank you.